Let's go ahead and get started as we go through. As I said, a dealership, regardless of whether you're in outdoor power, ag, small ag, utility, compact, power sports, RV, it doesn't make any difference what you're in. There's certain numbers that you need to understand, and this goes back again from the software standpoint, and then having the software give you those numbers back so that on a daily, weekly, or at least monthly basis, you're going back and evaluating kind of the base numbers, your key performance indicators by department to make sure that you're on track. I think probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see dealerships make, and especially the ownership, is that they know there are numbers, but they don't really know where they're at relative to those numbers. So my goal over the next 45 minutes or so is to kind of lay out by department, here are the numbers that you should be looking at, the numbers that you really need to be running your dealership against, what I would call best practice numbers. And you may not be there, so don't beat yourself up severely if you're not there, but at least gives you a baseline of saying, here's where I'm at, here's where I know I probably need to be, and then how do I get from this point here to this point here. And even if you don't get all the way up to the top, I tell all my dealers, at least we got to be moving in that direction. Once you start managing by the numbers and your people understand what the numbers are, you're going to see some incredible things start happening in your dealership in terms of your employee attitudes actually change. I think you're going to have a higher customer satisfaction rate, which is an important part of what we're doing, because we are in business to make money, and the only way we can do that is we're going to have happy, motivated, excited customers that come back and buy from us, but more importantly, tell other people that they should come in and buy from us. So that's important. And from an ownership standpoint, it takes all the stress out of your life. Once you know the numbers, then we can start saying, okay, well, how do I move those numbers up? So it's so important. Again, I want to thank Basic for sponsoring this. Again is going to, if you've got the software, if you've got business management software in place, I think you're going to find all these numbers will make sense, and you can start pulling them out and starting today, start looking at where you're at with those numbers, how are you doing, and then how do I get myself moved to that next level of doing it. So let's go ahead and get started. Most important thing, again, is the better you manage your numbers, the more profitable your business will be. And as I tell this to all of my dealerships, if you don't know what your numbers are, you're basically looking at the bottom line every year, and if you look at your income statement and there's no bracket around the last number in it, you may go, well, I had a good year, at least I didn't go in the hole. Or if you have a bracket around the last number, or if it's in red, you go, well, I didn't have a good year, I don't understand what happened. And I tell people again, so numbers mean a lot, and there are specific numbers by department that you need to look at. So again, numbers are an important part of the dealership. People are important too, but I tell people do best when they know what they're being measured against, and every department has its unique numbers that you measure it against. And so as you look at the numbers, and then as you share those numbers with your managers, or your managers share those numbers with the people, all of a sudden things start to happen in a very positive way in your dealership. So know the numbers, and again, the better the numbers you have, the more profit you're going to have in your dealership. And that's why we're in business. We're in business to make money. I tell people, as long as it's not illegal, immoral, unethical, or life-threatening, there is nothing wrong with making money. And the better you are at managing to those numbers that I'm going to be talking about here, the more money you're going to make. And the more money you make, the more that you can share that with the people that are helping you make it. I'm a big fan of making sure that employees, all the people that help you get to where you're at, should get to participate in the profitability of their department and of the dealership. And so those numbers are an important part of it. Whoops, hang on here just a second. There we go. Each department is unique, as I said before. And so again, when we look at service, there are certain numbers we're going to baseline against. We look at parts, and the same thing when we look at sales. And a lot of times in the sales side of it, as we get into that, you're going to find that most of my dealers know what their gross profit margin is, which is an important number. But there are other numbers in the sales side of the business that you need to be aware of and need to be looking at. So let's talk about service as we get started in this. Probably to me, and if you know me and you've followed me and read my articles in Real Lifestyle Dealer Magazine, you know that our expertise in dealerships is in service and parts. We do turnarounds. And so service is one of those areas I always start with everything I do, because I truly believe that there is more money that can be gained quickly in a dealership from a profitability standpoint in the service department than in any other places. Sure, you can sell more whole goods. You can sell more tractors, more excavators, more RTVs, UTVs, ATVs, side-by-sides. You can sell more whole goods. I get that, right? But whole goods are very dependent upon the weather. Whole goods are very dependent upon the economy, interest rates, things like this. Service really is going to happen. Service is all about not what you're selling today, but all of the inventory that you have sold over the years that's in the field and us getting it back in there. So to me, service is kind of that backbone. If you're doing everything right in your dealership, your service department should be that backbone of the dealership, and it should be very profitable. I was speaking to a group of people last week down in Florida, and one of the dealers, and it's a pretty good sized dealership, said, you know, I just hope I break even in the shop. And I go, but it's crazy just to try to break even in the shop. It is like this ATM machine that throws off $100 bills all day long if you get it going correctly. And he said it's just so hard to run a shop. It's not hard to run a shop if you understand the numbers of the shop. To me, the service department is probably one of the simpler things in a dealership to operate. Sure, you have to find technicians. I tell people, and good technicians aren't as hard to find as everybody says they are. The challenge is most of you can't pay good technicians what they expect to be paid, and if you can't afford to pay them, then they are hard to find. With the oil fields and everything starting to shut down, I'm seeing more and more people that we're able to pull into it. So the key thing is understanding in service what you're really selling, because most dealerships think that in service we're selling dollars. You're not selling dollars in service, you sell time. Time is the inventory product that you have in your service department. And so what you have to do is make sure that you're effectively measuring and managing the time that you're buying every day. So understand that time is the inventoried item of a service department, not dollars. The dollars have nothing to do with service. It's all about how much time did we buy every day, and how did we do every day at selling the time that we purchased. So the measure of that is a thing called the recovery rate. So there are three key measurements in the service department. Production rate, which is how many hours are you hiring a person to be there versus how many hours is that person turning a wrench. And from that, we have to take away vacation time, training, and things like this. And that's a number that's probably never going to exceed 85%. It's important to know the number, but the most important number to know in your shop as a service department, and the number one thing I would hold my service manager accountable to, is not the production rate or the production ratio, it's the recovery rate or the recovery ratio of the service department. So the recovery rate of the service department looks at how well your service manager is selling the time that you as an owner or a principal are buying every day. So it's just simply a measurement of how many hours did I pay for today for a technician to be here, and of those hours that they were here, how many billable hours did they make during that time? So the recovery rate's an important number to be looking at. I would expect a service manager in any shop that's operating efficiently and healthily to be selling and recovering at a minimum probably 90% at the low, and you can't if you're using your flat rate pricing right as a part of your pricing strategy for that. So the recovery rate is a simple measurement. How many hours was a technician here today? And of those hours, how many billable hours did they produce? So if they were there 8 hours and you got 8 billable hours out of that technician that day, you would have recovered 100% of that time. So it's an important measurement to know. And again, if you're using business management software like with Basic, it's something that comes up in your labor analysis report. And you should be looking at that as an owner every day. I want to look at how many hours did I buy today and how many hours did I sell today. It's kind of like balancing your cash drawer out at the end of the night. So it's an important measurement to be looking at as a part of your numbers. And this is one, again, if I were a dealer, it would be a report, a number I would look at every night. It's just the same as balancing out a cash drawer. So if your recovery rate, as you're looking at that, there's several things that your recovery rate shows you from an ownership standpoint. It looks at your staffing needs for the department. So if I'm recovering at, say, 60%, and your service manager is saying, hey, we need another technician, we can't keep up, or hey, we need to pay more overtime because we can't keep up. I'm going, if you're only recovering 60% of your time, the last thing you should be doing as an owner is authorizing overtime. That absolutely makes no sense to me. If you're recovering at 60% in an 8-hour day, you're only billing out 4.8 hours of time, and yet you have technicians you are paying time and a half because you can't keep up. There is something drastically wrong with your processes or something that's happening in your shop. So I tell my service managers, if you're not recovering at that 90, 95 to 100% range, you don't need another technician. Your processes are broken. We need to fix that because you never throw a body at a problem. The biggest mistake that we make in small businesses is we believe that if we have a problem, what I need is another person to solve the problem. Seldom does a person solve your problem. Your problem doesn't exist because you don't have enough people. Your problem in most cases exists because you have bad processes, or you've got processes but then nobody's following those processes. So the last thing you ever add to a problem is a body, because the toughest thing to get rid of is a body. Ask anybody that's ever killed somebody. It's very, very hard to get rid of a body. The other thing it lets me know, again, your recovery rate reveals how good you are at flat rating the work that's coming into your shop. People say, well, there's no way you can recover over 100%. That's not true. If you're doing time and material work, meaning that I have an hour and I'm going to charge an hour for that time, so every job is a time and material job, you're correct. You could never exceed 100%. But I don't have any shop that we work with that time and materials all the jobs they do. Probably 20% of the work we can't flat rate, but 70 to 80% at least of the work that takes place in the service department can be flat rated. If you don't have a flat rate system, use your manufacturer's warranty rate guides. Look at your warranty recovery rate, which is an important number to know. And if you're only recovering at 80% by the manufacturer for warranty, you need to make sure you're adding 30% more at minimum, 30% more to their warranty times, and then you can use your manufacturer's warranty rate guide as a relatively effective flat rate guide for your system. Placement of work by a technician's qualifications. If I have a low recovery rate, many times I also have a manager that's not giving work to a technician that fits in with what that technician's skills or capabilities can be. So again, I might have a lower recovery rate because I'm putting work in the hands of a technician that really doesn't have the skill set to handle that job. So they get upside down on the job, and all of a sudden I've got them on a job for 4 hours, and I'm only going to be able to build 2 hours for. And I see this happen many times with electrical issues or hydraulic issues where I have a technician that just doesn't have the wheelbase to be able to handle that kind of work. And then again, marketing needs for the service department. Many times, especially as we get into slow seasons, my service manager's not doing a good job of going out and getting more work, and that's a service manager's job. As a service manager, your job is to make sure that there's enough work coming into that shop to keep those technicians busy 8 hours a day. If it's not, then you have too many technicians, or you need to go out and work on marketing and bringing in more work into the shop. So recovery rate reveals several things for me, but that's one of the reasons that I want to look at it. As you look at, again, the recovery rate, I would expect a minimum to never be below 85%. All right, so a technician should be at least billing out 6.8 hours of billable time for every 8 hours they're paid to be at the dealership. So again, 85% would be my bare minimum that you could be at if you're going to be a service manager in one of my service departments, and that's a 12-month average. So again, that's the minimum. If you're falling below 85% as a service manager, something's wrong, and you need to get focused on working on and fixing that as a part of what you're doing. All right. Then the other thing, again, we look at recovery. We look at technicians' individual time. So billed hours versus paid hours as we look at measurements. So if I had 5 billable hours and I paid out 8 hours for that technician to be there, I'd only be recovering 63%. Keep in mind, it's billable time. That's how you calculate recovery versus how many hours that they're physically paid to be there. Okay. My total service department, if I took my total billed hours and I divided by my total paid hours, I could also look at my total service department recovery. So if I had 510 billable hours and I divided that by 480 paid hours, it would tell me that I was recovering at 106%. That's a phenomenal number. And as I would tell a service manager, once you get recovering in that 95 to 100% range, you need to start looking for another low-level B technician to start taking on some of the lower, easier jobs and start growing your technicians up. So important measurements from a recovery standpoint. Tech efficiency is another measurement we look at. So it looks at how efficient are your technicians on individual work orders that are assigned to them. So I want to look at recovery rate, which is a picture of paid time, how many hours are you there versus the billable time. Tech efficiency looks at time turning a wrench versus billable time. So those two measurements take the place there. Tech efficiency can be impacted by multiple things, being assigned jobs that are well above their skill level, and I talked about that before in recovery. So if a technician is given a electrical diagnostic job and they don't have the skill set to do that, they might be 4 hours on a job that I can only bill 2 hours for, so their tech efficiency is going to be down. Not enough time being assigned to complete to complete a job based upon equipment condition. So you put a technician on the job, you don't give them enough time based upon the equipment condition. So important to understand in the shop that different levels of condition require you to add more time to a flat rate. So we have 3 different levels of condition in our shops. We have excellent to good, good to fair, and fair to poor. So if a technician is working on a job, and let's say they've got 4 hours on this job, but you look at this equipment and you're going, this is in fair to poor condition, instead of being 4 hours on that job, they should be allowed 6 hours to do that same job. And so many times the technician's efficiency is lower, again, because the manager is not adding time based upon equipment condition on a job that's going to be flat rated as a part of what they're doing out there. Improper parts ordering or pulling. I was just on a webcast a couple of weeks ago, and the service department and the parts department have a huge wall between them. There are things that the parts department should be making available for the service department, and they weren't. And so I was starting to lose efficiency in my shop, not because of my technicians or because my process in my shop was broken. Their processes were great. What we had happened was there was a barrier, a wall that the parts manager had made a decision to put into place, and he was making it difficult. They couldn't order anything except at a certain time, and the parts manager was creating barriers for me to achieve my profitability that I needed in the service department. And so as we worked with the service department, I ultimately had to get the parts manager and the owner in a conversation and to break down some of these walls. So that's a part that can also impact you from a tech efficiency standpoint. Bad staging of equipment. You got a technician that's out roaming around trying to find what their next job is. That should never happen in your shop. Technicians are like surgeons. Their next job should always be ready and waiting, should be cleaned and ready to go in the shop. So you should never have a technician doing anything that you can pay somebody $10 or $11 an hour to do. If your posted labor rate is $80 an hour, find somebody for 12 or 15 bucks an hour that can go do the support things that technicians need. We call them service coordinators. So all your technician's doing is standing there turning a wrench, and then make sure they got the right tools to do the job with, or they don't have the right kind of equipment to do it with. We don't make our own tools. If a manufacturer says they have specialty tools to do these jobs, you've got to make those investments in those tools to make sure that these guys aren't trying to do things with tools that are not made to do the job, because it just sucks up more time from what they're doing. So we don't make tools, we buy them. If the manufacturer says to put this belt on this air conditioner, on this tractor, on this compressor, it takes this special tool to do it. There are some tractors out there, trust me, you can't do it with a screwdriver. If you don't have the right tool, that belt is not going to go on, or if you do put it on, it's going to get damaged. So making sure that your technicians have the tools that they need to work with. And by the way, if it's a specialty tool, you add extra time to a work order to cover the cost of that tool over a period of time. I would expect the tool to be paid for within 12 months of having it, and from that point on, it becomes a profit center for me for what I'm doing. Tech efficiency, again, is pretty simple. It's billed hours divided by the actual time that they're on a work order. So if a technician had 3 billable hours on a work order and they got it done in 2.5 hours, they would be 120% efficient. And I tell people again, if you have an A-level technician, an A-level technician should, and you know, this is when you know that you're pricing your jobs out correctly. An A-level technician should be in that 115 to 120 range all the time. If you have A-level technicians and you're barely getting over from a tech efficiency standpoint of 100%, you are not pricing your jobs out correctly, because your job pricing should be based upon a B-level technician, right, not an A-level technician. So a B-level technician should be at 100% on a job, and an A-level technician should be at probably 115 to 120% on every job. So I'd stress again, if as a manager you're having a hard time getting your A-level techs to 100%, you're not pricing your jobs out correctly, because your price point for all work in your shop is based upon a B-level technician, not based upon an A-level technician. So keep that in mind. And again, B-level technician should be in the range of 85 to 100% on at least 80% of their work. So that's, again, you need to understand that and know that that's where you put those pricing points in place at. Average completion time is another thing I would encourage you to make sure that you're doing. You know, one of the things that we're going to see more and more and more in the future is people don't want to wait. They want to go ahead and get things scheduled in, and most of your software has a scheduling feature in it as a part of it, and Basic does. And so again, what I need to know is to keep track of, on the average, how long does it take me to take a work order from open to closed, okay? That's called your average completion time. Now, that's going to vary by technician, because most of your technicians are doing different types of things, but that's a number that you need to know and that you need to understand. And again, if I just took my my work orders from open to closed, and I divided those by how much time did that take. And again, you can pull this report out of your software. That's going to give you a number. So let's say that my average time to complete a work order from open to closed is, let's say, 4 hours. And I have a customer that calls me up and says, hey, I have this tractor, and you know that tractor is going to go to a specific technician, and the average time it takes him to complete a work order is 4 hours, right, as an average. I know some are 6 hours, some are 2 hours, but let's say it's an average of 4 hours. And the customer says, I want to bring it in, but it's not bad, so I don't want to bring it into you until I know you're ready for it, okay? If I knew that the average time to complete a work order for that specific technician was 4 hours, I could go look at all my open work orders that is assigned to that technician, and let's say he has 10 jobs that are assigned to him. I know if the average job is 4 hours, those 10 work orders represent roughly 40 billable or 40 hours of time to do that, so I know that technician is approximately 1 week behind, okay? So I could tell the customer effectively and be pretty accurate. I tell you what, we'll come by, if you want to drop it by on Friday, we'll be ready for it on Monday, and we should be able to have it back to you by Tuesday, assuming we have all the parts that we need to complete or affect the repair. That average completion time is an important number to know. You should know it by technician, and more importantly, you should know it by as an average for the whole shop, because I tell all your technicians there's absolutely no reason as a service manager that you can't give a customer a 4 to a 6 hour or at least a 1 day window of when you're going to be ready to work on their equipment. Too many managers go, well, we're really busy here. I don't know. You ought to see all the equipment we have out here. Well, you can't determine how far you are behind by looking out your door and looking at all the equipment out there. Your software will do it for you, and it's called your average completion time, and I would encourage you to figure out what yours are. And so, again, I tell people, again, if you start tracking this as one of the numbers that you're managing by, it's pretty incredible how quickly you can start getting your customers scheduling things, and they're going to love you for it. Average completion time is the actual time divided by completed work orders. So if I had 32 hours of actual time and 18 work orders, then my average time to complete a job would be 1.78 hours. Okay, so I know that I can multiply that by 1.78 by my number of open work orders, and I'll know exactly where I'm at. Your average time to completion time in the shop is your total actual time divided by your completed work orders. And again, it would tell me that, well, my one tech was averaging 1.78 hours. As a shop, as a totality, we're averaging 1.28 hours on the total average of the shop. So very easy to start scheduling from that standpoint, and your customers are going to love you for keeping track of those things. So again, how far are you behind in your shop? I tell people, once you know what your average completion time is, just multiply by open work orders, and I'm telling you, you won't be more than 4 hours off if you're keeping track of this number on how far you are. So when a customer says, hey, I got this excavator I want to bring in, I got a cylinder leaking on it, it's not bad, but I don't want to bring it into you until you're ready for it. So if you can go ahead and get the seals and everything ordered for the cylinder, and then let me know when to bring it in. And I'm telling you, you could say, hey, bring it in on Monday morning. And if you got your shop running right and your average completion time correct, you bring it in on Monday morning, and I'll have it ready for you Monday afternoon, assuming we don't need anything other than the seals that I'm going to go ahead and get ordered for it. So important to do, and it makes your life easier in the shop. It makes the customers, again, happier. Let's take a look at parts. Again, same thing. Everything in a parts department has numbers associated with it. Your numbers help you evaluate the growth, where you are from a growth standpoint. Profitability looks at your gross profit margin, those things like this. Your people's effectiveness, how many transactions are your people able to do over a given period of time. And then your ultimately customer satisfaction, which in my world always goes back and relates to fill rate, out of stock, and inventory. So let's talk about our parts numbers real quick. Transactions happen in a parts department, just like what we look at in a shop. We measure time. In a parts department, our real key measurement tends to evolve around transactions, the size of the transaction, the volume of the transaction, and how much time did it take me to make that transaction happen, kind of like your completion rate. What's the average time it takes me to move a person from the parts counter back out the door with a part in their hand or with an order for a part that'll be coming back in. So those are the things that we're looking at. Average transaction value is an important thing to be looking at. So what I want to know is, on the average in my parts department, what is the average value of every transaction that takes place? And this is important because in parts, we're always working to try to grow that parts business through cross-selling and upselling. And so once you know what your average transaction value is, it's fairly easy to start putting in place some sort of a program for your parts people, some sort of incentive to grow that business. So what I want to do is I want to take my total parts dollars sold. So over a period of time, whether it's a week or a month or a year, how many dollars did I sell, and then how many transactions, my service department transactions as well as my counter transactions, how many transactions did that represent? So my example here is if I had $32,000 of total parts sold, maybe that's in a week or a month, depending upon the size of your dealership, and there were 800 transactions that took place to sell those $32,000 worth of parts, that tells me the average value of each transaction, every ticket on the average was worth $40. So that's how you figure your average transaction value. And again, if you're running business management software, you have the ability in your software to pull this report out. Very, very important report for you to be looking at. Okay, then what I want to look at, because in parts departments, every parts person says, oh, we need more parts people, we need more parts people, we need more parts people. Seldom is that true. What I want to do is say, okay, well, if we took our average transactions and I divided by my parts people, all right, and then I divided that by how many of those transactions happen per day and how much time per each transaction, it would tell me what my average transaction per person is and how much time that transaction took place. So as an example, if I had 800 transactions and I had 2 parts people, that means that each one of them on the average doing 400 transactions per month, that would be 20 per day, 2.5 per hour, or 1 every 24 minutes. And so when you say, gosh, Bob, I don't have enough time to do my cyclical count of my inventory, I don't have enough time to get this done, I don't have enough time to make those phone calls, I'm going to call BS on that. That's just not true. Okay, you've got plenty of time, right? You're just not using your time correctly. So you can't tell me that it takes, on the average, 24 minutes for every customer that you're working with to take care of them. Some may be longer than that, some may be that, some may be shorter. But I tell people, again, it's so important to know what that average transaction value is, divide that out, and if you just run your numbers against it, it'll tell you on the average you have 24 minutes in this example for every transaction that takes place in your parts department. So it's an important number to know, and again, easy number to get out of your business management software. The other piece we want to look at is the average transaction time. So how long does it take from the moment a person walks up to the parts counter to the moment they leave to make a transaction happen? Average time in outdoor power is about 7 minutes. In utility and compact tractors, that's going to be running probably closer to 12 minutes. Heavy construction, probably going to be running closer to 12 to 15 minutes. But in outdoor power, as an example, our goal in outdoor power is to have a transaction happen in 4 minutes or less. And so again, your goal in the parts department is to say, here's how much time I'm currently taking to do a transaction. And I don't care what the number is. I don't care if it's 28 minutes. The question you have to say is, how can I reduce that down by 2 or 3 minutes, or 3 or 4 minutes? And so that's a measurement that you want to take in your parts department, and it's going to help you refine where your parts are at. Make sure your fastest moving parts are close to the parts counter. Make sure that you take the stools away from the parts counter so people don't sit down and have conversations with you at season. Nothing wrong with putting them there when times are slow, but I tell people the last thing I want you to do is sit down and tell me the history of you and this tractor for the next 40 minutes. If you don't have a stool there, they will tend to be faster at what they want. If it's an older person, always have a stool handy where you can pull one out, they can sit down. But again, at that point, what I'm trying to do, especially at season, is move these people through faster. I still want to have a good interaction with them, but I tell my parts people, but more time doesn't mean a better relationship building time for most people. All you do is irritate the people that are waiting for you to go there. So that average transaction time is an important one. Fill rate out of stocking inventory is when it drives me nuts. Everybody today is all complaining and moaning because people are going online and they're buying parts online. Yeah, it's because they probably came to your dealership. They had to wait for 35 or 40 minutes for you to take care of them, only to find out that when they walked up to the parts counter, you said, hey, I don't have that part, but I can get it for you in a day or two. I can go to Amazon and have it delivered to me in 2 days. And what happens again in the parts department, we're not keeping track of that fill rate out of stocking inventory. Right? People come to you in most cases first to get the part that they want. You're a dealership. That's what they do. The thing is you got to make sure and you got to make a commitment that you've got the parts that they need. The wear parts on the product that you sell should be in stock. All right. So fill rate out of stocking inventory is an important measurement. This should be something that you're measuring every month in your parts department. On the average, right? How many times am I able to fill a customer's order out of my stocking inventory? And it's a fairly simple calculation. And again, Basic is a software company we recommend, and a lot of our dealers use. They already have this built into a formula for you if you're using Basic. But if you just took your total parts sold, you subtracted lost sales, special orders, and emergency orders, and divided that again by total parts sold, it would tell you what your fill rate out of stock and inventory is. This needs to be in the mid-80s to low 90s. It's an important number to be at. So my formula down there, if I had 200 parts sold and I had 10 lost sales, 8 special orders, and 2 emergency orders, and I redivided that by 200, it would tell me my fill rate out of stocking inventory is 90%. I'm going to tell you that most of you are probably filling 75 to 80%, not 85 to 90%. The problem that most of you guys have is you guys are not keeping track of lost sales. And lost sales is a critical component of knowing what this number is. You all know in the parts department how important it is that we put parts in stock based upon demands. Well, if you don't keep track of lost sales, okay, that's a demand that nobody's keeping track of. And so we have a part failing in the field. Nobody, including the manufacturer, knows when a part's starting to fail faster than a parts department, because there becomes a demand for that part. If you don't have it, because you don't have a history of ever needing it, so you don't have it in stock. I get that. But if you're not keeping track of lost sales, you might have 3 or 4 different people come in over a period of a week. If you got 2 or 3 people at the parts counter, they're not keeping track of this stuff, and so you're losing that valuable measurement of a part that's failing in the field. And you don't have it. Pretty soon people just go online, and once people start going online and ordering things, it's harder to get them back into your parts department. So keep track of lost sales. I know managers hate to do this, but I'm telling you, you can't run a proper parts department if that's not one of the metrics that you're tracking, and all your software will do it for you. You just have to punch a button and keep track of it from that standpoint. So know what your fill rate out of stock and inventory is, and really stay on top of it and keep track of where you're at. Then the other piece is your gross profit margin. I tell people it's important to understand that gross profit margin varies a little bit, based upon the type of product mix you have. My folks that are just strictly in outdoor power, they're running 48 to 53 average gross profit margin on OEM parts. My folks that are doing outdoor power and compact and utility tractors tend to be running more in that 42 to 45 range. My dealers that are running just big ag are tending to run in that 38 to 42 range, and my guys that are running in heavy construction and things like that tend to be running in about the 35 to the 38 range. So you got to make sure you kind of know where you're at on that, and then you're using your business management software to do matrixing, right? And if you're not familiar with pricing matrices, all your software will do this. And if you need a copy of it, just shoot us an email or whatever, and I'll send you our pricing matrix. Again, Basic already has it available to them, so you can integrate that into what you're doing there. But to build your pricing up so that you've got your margins where you need to be, you can't be 53% on everything. There are certain items that are price sensitive, so you mark those back down. That's called velocity pricing. You move them back down a little bit, and then you move parts that are not price sensitive up a little bit so that you can maintain the integrity of your gross profit margin. So again, you need to know where you're at with your gross profit margin and really manage your numbers on that. There's so much money that is left, again, just left on the table that you could pick up if you did a really stayed focused on that. There's not a one of you that's on this webcast that probably couldn't squeeze another 1 or 2% out of your gross profit margin in your parts department. And it's not much, but if you're doing, again, $500,000 a year in parts sales, you add another 2% to that, that's a nice chunk of money. That's all net profit that you can flow back into the dealership and help with. And I'm more than happy from a dealer standpoint to pay out profit, to pay out bonuses again on that new money. So stay focused on that gross profit margin, and again, tweak. That's a part of what you're trying to do in the parts side of it. In sales, again, this is one that drives me nuts. Everybody knows what their gross profit margin is on their sales, and I tell people, again, you don't have a lot of ability in the sales and the whole goods side of things to control your margins. Your marketplace has more to do with what your margins are going to be than what you decide to do from a dealership standpoint. So again, so the most important measurement to me in service is not your margins. Well, I want you to hold your margins there and not give things away. But the one thing that most of you don't know is what your closing ratio is. Now, I'm an old sales guy. I started my company 30 years ago training salespeople. And I'm here to tell you that if you're in sales and you're a salesperson and you don't know what your closing ratio is, you're not in sales. Your closing ratio is the most important measurement of you as a salesperson than any other thing that you can do. And so your closing ratio is an important measurement in there. So let's talk about that a little bit and how we can then leverage that into increasing our sales in our dealership. So your closing ratio is a pretty simple measurement. If I just simply take my total sales transactions. I divide that by how many customers that I talk to, customer contacts. These are not people that these were people that had the ability to buy from me. Okay, that's your measurement. So if I had 20 sales and I had 60 people that I talked to that were able to buy from me, okay, they're qualified, that would tell me that my closing ratio would be 33%. So I just take 20 and I divide it by 60 people that I talked to that were qualified to buy, and my closing ratio then would be 33%. That's a pretty low number. I would tell you that in a dealership where people walk in, they already know what you have, they know who you are. You ought to be closing as a salesperson 40 to 45% of everybody that walks in that's qualified to buy. So if you don't know what your closing ratio is, figure it out. Okay, and again, your software can help you do that. If you do know what it is and it's not in the 40 to 45 range, get some training, because you are losing a ton of business because you're missing something. You're either not qualifying properly, you're not handling objections, you're not negotiating correctly. There's something that you're doing wrong that is costing your dealership a ton of money. So know what your closing ratio is. You also need to know what your average whole goods sales transaction is. Just as we wanted to know this in the parts side, we also want to know it in the sales side. Okay, so I want to know what my average transaction is. And I understand that you have all different kinds of things you sell, but if you took all your total transactions, like I have on the screen here, total sales, and you divided that by the total transactions it took you to get to those sales, just divide those two numbers together, it'll tell you, as an average, your average sale is $3,000. So if I had $78,000 in sales, and it took me 260 sales transactions to generate that. I had 260 sales that were whole good related sales. I just simply divide 780,000 by 260, and it tells me that my average sale is $3,000. Okay, so if I said, gosh, I want to increase my whole goods sales by 10%, well, all I have to do is take the average sale I do and increase that by 10%. So I'd have to take my sales from averaging $3,000 to averaging $3,300. Heaven's sakes, I could do that in 1,000 ways. If I were a salesperson, all I would have to do for most of you, if you're selling utility or compact tractors, I would just have to add the first service package in as a part of the sale and get them to tie that into their financing. I could easily move a sales transaction up by 10% by just simply tying service and parts, the first service in on that equipment, into that sale and making that a part of the transaction. Right? So I tell people it's easy to increase sales by 10% once you understand what your average sale is, and then looking at different things you can do as a salesperson or as a dealership to add packages to that sale that's going to increase by an extra 10 or even maybe 15%. So it's an important number to know. The average value of a contact. Now, this is, again, one of the things that I need you to understand. I'm an old sales guy. Again, I've been selling for a lot of years. What I really want to know is, on the average, everybody that comes into my dealership that doesn't come in for parts, or that's just specifically for parts, or is not coming in for service. So these are not people that are necessarily qualified to buy. I just want to know, of all the bodies that walk in my dealership that are not here for parts or service, that just come in, they're looking, they're kicking the tires, they're walking around, they're bored, they got nothing else to do. Of all those people, that's the group that I'm looking at now. We call them suspects in the world that I live in. So of all these people, what's the value of everybody that's not here for service or parts? Everybody else that walks through that door has a value to them. All right, and so that's what we're going to call the average value of a contact. The average value of a person to the dealership that walks in through the doors that's not there to buy parts or service. So let's use this as an example. Let's say if I had $780,000 in sales and there were 780 people that walked in. So if my closing ratio is 33%, that number would be 780. Okay, of the 63% of the people didn't come in, that represented 260. The other part of that, the 63 or 67%, I'm sorry, that didn't buy from me, that represents 780 people. So that tells me that for every person that walked in that door, I generated $1,000 of gross sales. Every person that walked in. I don't care if they're kicking the tires. I don't care if they're just walking in to go to the bathroom. I don't care why they're there. Every person that walked through that door has a value. Now, I'm taking out parts and I'm taking out service. Every person that walked through the door has a value. in this particular dealership, in this example, of $1,000. So when they walk in the door, it's worth $1,000 of gross sales to you. If your gross profit margin is, say, 10% or 15%, right, that's $150 of net profit, of profit back into your pocket, but $1,000 per contact of gross sales. So if you want to grow your equipment sales by 29%, as an example, so if you said, Bob, I'd love to grow my sales by 30% this year, and if these numbers were your numbers, I could sit here and say, all we have to do to grow your sales by 30% roughly is get one more person per day to come in through that door, whether they're interested in buying from you or not. Just one more person every day walking through that door. 250 more people walking through that door this year than did last year, right? Right? And my closing ratio is 33%. I would add 30% more sales to my whole goods department. Or I could simply do the other thing, not have any more people come in than I'm currently having come in as an average. But if I move my closing ratio from 33 to 44%, I would also increase my gross sales by 30%. So I tell people again, once I know that number, I can sit here and say, what would I have to do in my dealership to get one more person per day to walk in? And I was talking to a group of dealers about this last week down in Florida, and they said, if it were me, and I knew that every person that walked through the door had a value of $1,000 of gross sales, and I had, let's say, a 10% gross profit margin, I would give away a $20 gift card every day for everybody that walks in that looks at equipment, because if my gross profit is 10% of $1,000, it's $100 that I'm going to make for every person that comes in there. Every person that walks in there has a value of $100 of gross profit to me. I'll give away gladly $20 of that, right, to get those people to walk in the door. I tell people it's a no-brainer. It's not difficult, but you got to know the numbers and you got to know where they're at. Or you say, gosh, Bob, I don't want to invest $20 a day in some sort of a giveaway. Then for heaven's sakes, get your people to sales training and teach them how to negotiate, how to qualify, how to prospect, how to close sales, how to handle objections. Because that, again, is going to help you improve your closing ratio. So either way you do it, doesn't make any difference to me. But when you say, gosh, Bob, I'd like to grow my sales by 30%, it's easy to do if you understand the numbers. And I tell people that's really what it's all about. And your software gives you all of this information. So as you think about your business and you think about the numbers in your business, understand that everything you need to know to make your business more profitable is available to you if you just use your software, right? Know the numbers that you're measured against, and then drive your business toward those numbers. All right, let's go ahead and open it up for questions.
Thanks, Bob. That's terrific. I think we'll probably have to circle back offline about your familiarity with disposing of dead bodies, but we have had a couple of good questions come through.
All right. Well, I don't know how to dispose of them. I just know they're hard to get rid of.
All right, first one. Bob mentions a 40 to 45% close ratio on walk-in traffic. We get a lot of customers calling in to get pricing on equipment. Do you have a different close ratio on call-in inquiries versus walk-in? And secondly, what's your position on giving quotes out over the phone without ever seeing the customer?
Sure, that's a great question. Absolutely. The goal is to get the customer in. And so what you have to do is you have to set the phone call up. So if you called a dealership that I was training and the phone call came in, they go, hey, what's the best price you can give me on this tractor? The first question I would say is, are you in a position to buy the tractor today? And if they go, well, no, I'm not, I say, well, I can't give you the best price then, but I can give you a good price. Okay, and they'll go, well, how come you can't give me the best price? Because manufacturers are constantly coming out with new programs, new finance programs, new spiffs and things like this. If you come in when you're ready to buy, you and I will sit down and I'll make sure that we get you the absolute best price you can possibly get. So today I can give you a good price, but I'm telling you that it's probably not going to be the best price because I won't be able to give you the best price until you're ready to make a decision to buy. So with that in mind, here's a good price. And so I tell people again, I'm not going to discount anything on the telephone. I'm going to let them know that if they want the best price, then the time to do that is when they're ready to buy. and then I'll sit down with them and we'll look at all the manufacturers that we have. We'll look at the finance programs that we have. We'll look at any kind of manufacturer rebates or spiff coming back in. So the day that you're ready to buy is honestly, truthfully, the only day that I can give you the absolute best price. So with that in mind, I'll give you a good price, but keep in mind, when you're actually ready to buy, you come in and sit down with me, and I promise you, I will find you the absolute best price on this product or on this piece of equipment. So that's what I would do.
Okay, perfect. Next up, in your estimation, which is more important, customer fill rate or all parts turnover rate?
Well, parts turnover rate, that's kind of an old concept, and I won't say it's an old concept. I would say customer fill rate is more important because it has a bigger impact upon the customer experience, which is what we're really looking at here. Fill rate is one of those, and I know there's other consultants out there that would disagree with me on this, but I tell people fill rates is not a big deal to me. Most of my parts people are taking and doing a great job of taking advantage of the manufacturers' early order programs and things like this, and so and they have dating on those parts, and so in most cases I'm buying parts for my inventory that's got dating on them, so I don't really have to pay for them. It's not my money. I don't really have to pay for them until my season's over. So unlike it used to be where you didn't have those programs, you have those programs today. So I don't really care if I turn the manufacturer's money once or twice a year. Once it becomes my part, I'm more concerned about that because that is my money. And so I would expect to have a little higher turn rate on them. But I tell my parts people again, but even if I have a part that only turns once or twice a year, the service department may need that, and that may be a mission critical part, and I just simply add more margin to that part. So if my margins, if I'm trying to maintain let's say a 40% average gross profit margin, and I'm trying to keep my turns to, let's say, 3 times a year, maybe at a minimum on a part, I might take that part and I might move the margin up on it from 40 to 60% to offset my lack of turns on that part. I'm still going to sell it, but I'm not going to sell as many of it. So as a parts manager, I've got to move my margin up on that part to be able to cost justify me holding it there for the service department. Because in most cases, a slower turning part, at least in my experiences in 30 years in dealerships, the slower moving parts tend to go directly to your service department. And I'm here to tell you, as a service guy, I don't really care what you charge me for the part. I'm just tickled that you had it. So I would adjust my margin on a slower turning part. Now, if the part's no longer selling at all, if I haven't sold one in a year, then I'm going to put that in a return and I'm going to get it back to the manufacturer. But I wouldn't have a problem keeping a part that only turned a couple of times a year in my inventory. I just simply would move my margin up on that part to offset those lack of turns.
Okay. Part of your answer there kind of dovetails into another question that was submitted. What is your definition of an obsolete part? Is it that 1 year time frame that you're talking about?
Yeah, I would. Again, if I have a part that's still sitting there after a year, in my mind, it's time to move it out. Manufacturer will let me send it back, even if I have to pay 15% restocking and freight on it. I don't want it in my inventory anymore, so I don't want to count it. Mostly, I'm lazy. I just don't want to have to touch it and count it. So, yeah, if I got a part that hasn't sold in 1 year, it's going to go on back to the manufacturer, and I'm going to get it out of my inventory.
Got it. What is the best way to measure a specific brand's service work profitability and make the determination whether that brand is worth keeping from a service and parts perspective?
Well, there's a couple of, I guess, one, if you're looking at it from a warranty standpoint, then you need to be running your labor analysis report, your warranty from a warranty standpoint. So if I have a manufacturer that I'm only recovering on my warranty at maybe 50%, then I need to rethink that. If I'm doing 20% of my work is warranty-based work, then and maybe that manufacturer is sucking a lot of opportunity for me to be making more money doing non-warranty work. I'm going to stress something though, because I have a lot of dealers that say, well, I can't make any money on warranty. The first question I always ask is, well, what's your recovery rate? If you don't know what your recovery rate is, you don't know if you could make money on warranty because your shop is so screwed up, right? You're blaming the manufacturer because you can't make money on warranty. Really, it's not their fault. If you're not recovering at a high rate, It's not the manufacturer's fault that you can't do warranty and hit their times. If you're recovering at a high rate and you're still struggling to meet warranty, then I would say then it's an issue the manufacturer has with not allowing enough time. So I would look at that again. You know, I would expect a manufacturer, I would expect you to be recovering at 85 to 90% at a minimum on manufacturer warranty claims. You know, if it's fallen in that 40 or 50% range, or the manufacturer's made some decision to not allow you to, but only going to pay you $60 an hour instead of your posted labor rate, those things would come into play for me on whether I want to handle that line or not. Because some of your short line manufacturers out there screw the labor rates down so tight that it really doesn't make sense, and then their stuff is not that good in the beginning, so I'm end up sucking up and doing a lot of warranty work on it. So several things to play on that.
Gotcha. One of the attendees indicates that his brand scores them based on absorption and is looking for some ways to improve that criteria.
Sure. Well, absorption, I didn't cover that in this because some of my dealers focus on it or not, but absorption is basically if I took all the profit from parts and all the profit from service, gross profit, and then I subtracted out the cost of doing sales, my total profit of parts and service should cover theoretically 100% of the cost of the dealership. The challenge with that is that if I don't have a big enough shop, right, I'm never going to be able to have that absorption. You know, so I think it's not a bad measurement, but some manufacturers use it. And if I've only got, maybe I'm a small dealership and I've only got 2 technicians, but I'm selling a lot of whole goods, that's a big part of what I'm doing. You're never going to be able to absorb it 100%. So it's a little bit of a fictitious measurement. If I had 8 or 10 technicians and I had a parts department that was punching out $1 million or $1.5 million worth of parts sales at 40% gross profit margin, it's pretty easy to absorb it 100%. So I know some manufacturers use that. I would just challenge them on their thought processes because there's a lot of things that go into absorption. And if you're a small dealer that's just starting out, there is no way, I don't care what manufacturer says, I've been doing this for a lot of years and I do 200 shops a year, there's no way you could absorb it 100%. It's just not possible. You don't have the mass to make it happen. So again, you know, there's a lot of manufacturers, I won't say a lot of manufacturers, a few manufacturers out there that read a book that they probably shouldn't have read that was wrong. And then they're going to go back and try to tell a dealer how to do it, and they themselves could never run a dealership if they had to. So I'm not picking on manufacturers, but it frustrates me a little bit when manufacturers come out with some sort of grand theory to tell a dealer how to run their dealership when they themselves could never run one. So
Sure.
I will get off my soapbox now and quit picking on manufacturers.
Fair enough. Going back to the concept of lost sales that you mentioned, what are the best methods for getting your team to, 1, identify lost sales, and 2, keep track of it?
Well, I would reward them in some way. So, you know, so I would give some sort of a bonus based upon lost sales. I mean, it's a fairly easy thing to do. I tell all of my dealers, you know, if you want a behavior to happen, you have to catch a person doing it correctly and reward them when they do it. You know, I can tell you all day long that we need to keep track of lost sales, and this is why we should keep track of them. I would start off with some sort of reward. I would have $1 reward for every time that you click in a lost sale. I'll pay you $1 for just clicking that lost sale in and keeping track of it. So I found over the years I've been doing it, the easiest way to get somebody to do what you need them to do is to reward them in doing it. And it would be worth it to me. You wouldn't pay out that much money, but I'm telling you, your people would focus on it. They would go out of their way for $1 per entry to keep track of lost sales. So I would just reward them to do it.
Sounds good. One of the attendees is asking if you could confirm the parts gross margin percentage for each type of dealership. I think he had 44% for lawn, 30% for larger ag, and what were the remaining?
Yeah, so my measurement is kind of best practices is 48 to 53 on outdoor power only. So if you're only an outdoor power equipment dealer and that's all you're selling, you ought to be able to run 48 to 53% average gross profit margin on your OEM parts. All right, if you're a blend of OP and compact utility tractors, that's probably going to be closer to that 42 to 45%. Okay, if you're a compact tractor, utility tractor, and ag, you're probably going to be running closer 38 to 42%. And again, if you're heavy ag or you get into heavy construction, you're probably going to be running 32 to 38%. There's variables in that depending upon your competition and things like that. But those are kind of the baselines I use.
Okay.
You've got to mark your parts up over. You just have to mark your parts up over list price. And I had this conversation the other day. A person said, "Well, list price is list price. List price is mandated by the federal government. Every manufacturer is required by law to come up with an MSRP on an item. It's a manufacturer suggested retail price. It's a suggestion. It doesn't mean that's what it has to sell for. It's simply a suggested price. You can do anything to that price that you want based upon your market."
Got it. What are your thoughts on a parts zero sales period moving past 1 year in an 18 to 24-month time frame due to the seasonality on ag parts?
Again, I would always make, there's nothing's ever black and white. So if you're a parts person and you're maintaining a part in stock that has no sales on it for 18 to 24 months, I don't have a problem with that. Again, as long as you're still within the realm that a manufacturer would let you return it. And I think, to me, that would be the most important measurement. If I've got a part there that's there for 24 months and I haven't sold it, but I know based upon history that it is still a part that has value in my parts department, and I can still, at the end of 24 months, I can still return it and get my credits that I want to get off of it, then I don't have a problem with that. I'm okay with that, because I understand on big construction and big ag, there are some variables that we have to look at. So as long as I could return it to a manufacturer, pay my 15% restock and some freight, but I wouldn't keep it past 24 months. So 24 months to me is, okay, we've ran the clock out on this thing, and then it's time to move it on out. So I'm okay with that, depending upon, long as I could return it. That's still at 24 months and pay my 15% restock and my freight.
Great. Well, that's just about all the time we've got for today. Thanks for another wonderful webinar, Bob. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, today's presentation and audio are going to be made available on Rural Lifestyle Dealers' website. If you would like to go back and review it. If you have additional questions, feel free to email those to us. Keep an eye on your email and our eBrief email newsletter for additional information about when the replay will become available. On behalf of Bob and our team here at Rural Lifestyle Dealer, as well as the folks at Basic Software, thanks to everyone for joining us today.